Hey everybody, Carlos Kidman here for another episode of QA on Point. Today, I'm going to be answering the question that was probably the biggest question I got from my last episode, which last episode, if you guys remember, was all about selecting elements via dropdown. And a lot of people asked me about my kind of how I did the page object model, how I kind of interpreted that. Because when I said like I don't use the page object model off of like I think the page factory that Selenium comes with, I don't use that, and I've never really liked it. I do like factory patterns, I just don't like it for pages because I feel like it doesn't help to simplify the way the tests look and read, and that's a huge thing for me. Let's get right into it. We're gonna just start right from where we left off in the last episode. So let me switch over here to Visual Studio. I like kind of doing this where we have a goal for the episode, so that way we can kind of code against the goal. Getting right into it, we'll see here the setup. The first thing we want to do is to get the WebDriver going. That way we can open the browser and start doing things. Now the first thing I'm going to do is show you with Selenium out of the box. I'm not going to do anything fancy in here. It's just going to be what Selenium gives us, and then building the goal using just Selenium. Once we go over this, I'm going to show you the same exact test, just like I did last episode, but using the page object model. And we'll see that a lot of things get simplified, but it gets even more powerful as we try to scale or as we try to edit, maintain, or add tests. So the setup: instantiate a new iWebDriver. Number 2, maximize the window. And number 3, instantiate a new WebDriver. Now here, we're just going to use, almost every testing framework has like a before each or a setup or something like that. And so C# is no different. They have their test initialize. I'm just calling this method setup, and I'm doing these 4 things inside of it. So before every test, run this code, right? And so in this case, we're just going to build a Chrome driver. As many of you know, you just say options, Chrome options. I wanted to start with the browser maximized. Bada bing, bada boom. There's number 2 done, maximize the window. So here, you'll see that I have my WebDriver outside of the tests. That way, my setup will actually give it a value, and the rest of my test will have access to that. Using the page object model that I use, we actually don't have to do that. And so you'll see here real soon. I shouldn't talk too much about it because I'm ruining the fun. So WebDriver equals new Chrome driver. Cool. So now this WebDriver here is now going to be a new Chrome driver. We'll see Chrome open up. We'll be good to go. The next thing is the wait, WebDriver wait. For this test specifically, we won't be using it, but I wanted to put this in here because a lot of people's websites will have to use a WebDriver wait. So I just want to put it in here so you can see it. So wait equals new WebDriver wait. We got to pass in the WebDriver and then any time span. So now that we have that, that's the setup, right? Instantiate new iWebDriver, maximize the window, and then instantiate new WebDriver wait as well. I don't put it in here, but the cleanup is just like all the other test frameworks where they have like a teardown or after each, same exact thing. They just call it an MS test. They just call it test cleanup. And here we're going to say quit the WebDriver when we're done. And there you go. So with the setup, we've now completed it using lines 14 through 31. This right here would be our setup. So not too bad, right? It's pretty clean, relatively. So good stuff. So the next thing now we're going to do is actually go into the test. And remember, this is just using Selenium, this WebDriver, iWebDriver, WebDriver wait. This is all from Selenium. So you'll see here, openqa.selenium, openqa.selenium.chrome, and openqa.selenium.support.ui. So now that we have this, let's go line by line and kind of navigate through it. So number 49 here says WebDriver.navigates to URL statsroyale.com. Cool. Step 1, go to statsroyale.com. Step 2, go to popularDex page. Here we got to say WebDriver.find element by XPath. Find me this link right here that contains Dex. Click on this. And then from there, WebDriver.find element by link text popularDex. Click that. So that's going to open. Let me switch here and go to Stats Royale so we can actually see this rather than looking at via the code. So I go to statsroyale.com. I click on Dex. I click on popularDex, and that will take me here. Switch back over. And here we are, right? So here's the Dex link that you saw that opens up the little menu. popularDex, we click on that, that actually takes us to the next page. And then in here it says select the tournament's deck type from dropdown. That's this right here. So in this case, we're using the select element. If you remember the last video, if you don't know this part yet, then go back one video and look at the select element, because I go over this actually quite a bit more. But in here, we're going to say deck select equals new select element. Here's the element. We're going to find it by name type. Fortunately, they gave us that name. So if I right click on this right here and inspect it, it'll open up right over here and we'll see the name equals type. Well, there you go. That's it. Very, very simple. So by name type, and now the deck select is a select element. And then using this deck select, we can say deck select dot select by text tournaments. And so in here, that will be this one. We're going to be selecting tournaments. Very cool. The next thing is select the win percentage sort from dropdown as well. And so in here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to find this dropdown, this select by popularity, sort by win percentage, sort by average crowns. We'll use this. And here we're going to find it. It's a little bit cryptic. I'm sorry. It's one of the reasons why I like Stats Royale, because their elements they don't really make it testable. They kind of just built it to build it. And so you got to do some funky stuff like this. But this actually works really, really well. So this will find it. And then here we're going to say select by value win P. So if we switch back over here, let's right click on this and inspect. Over here, we'll open this up. And then we'll see that the value for win percentage, sort by win percentage, is win P. Right? So not too bad. So there we are here. We select by the value, and it's actually going to select those drop downs and populate them. The last thing we have is get the first deck, and then assert that that deck contains a win percentage of 91.05%, right? So if we switch back over here real quick, let's say we go to tournaments, we sort by win percentage. The first one should have 91.05%. And so that's what we're going to assert on, right? So here my first deck equals WebDriver.findElement by class name, popular decks deck. That is each one of these. Each one of these rows is one of those, right? And so it's going to give me the first one here. And then from there, it's going to go within the text and say assert that is true that the first deck.text contains 91.05, right? So that right there is the test. Going through it, it doesn't look that bad. However, this is actually really bad. What happens if I then need to write a new test that is something like, instead of doing popular decks and filtering based off of tournament and win percentage, what if I had to do the same thing but do it with like 2v2, like the deck select do by 2v2 instead? Select value, instead of doing win percentage, do it by crowns, right? This is just a very small example. It gets even more apparent when it's something like, well, what if I need to actually do different things on this? Like, so for example, if I were to go back one more time, there's actually a third drop down here, the arena, right? So if I was to refresh this page, it starts off like this, where it's ladder, arena 12, sort by popularity. What if I needed to say arena 12, let me switch this to like arena 1. Once I'm in arena 1, things change. Then I want to go by average crowns. And now I'm here, right? I'm doing ladder, arena 1, average crowns. So in order for me to do that, let me start making a test. Public void popular decks. And then we're going to say filter arena 1, exclamation, arena 1 crowns, just to give it a name, right? Now, essentially what I have to do is get all of this, copy it, and put it in here. Some would argue, well, why don't we just grab a lot of this and just copy paste it in here? Well, because not all of my tests are going to be doing that. And so then I'd have to create a whole new file, have a different setup, a different cleanup. You know what I mean? So like, and you can do that. It's just, again, you're doing all this work when all you're trying to do is just, have one different drop down selected by a different value and just keep going, right? So let's start going by just doing as much as we possibly can here. Let me grab all of this here. Let me paste it in here. Yes, we want to go to this. We're going to popular decks. Perfect. In this case, we want to make sure this is still on ladder, right? So this is still on ladder. We're not doing win percentage anymore. Let's go here. I want to do average crowns. Let me get the, what is the value here? It's called stars. So right click, copy that, go back over here. I don't want win percentage, I want stars. Sort select, and then I need var, and I need arena select equals new select element. WebDriver dot find element by hope for the love that it has that it has a name. I don't remember though, so let's go over here. Right click on this. Let's inspect this bad boy. And name arena, yay! The gods of element selectors have shined their love on us. Boom, and then we have arena select dot select by, I will just do text. Select by text, and here we're just gonna say arena 1. And the world will be happy now. So now we have this cool ladder, arena 1, stars, give me the first deck, and it should contain 2.24 crowns. So 2.24 crowns. All right. Let's build this so it goes into our tests. Cool. Right here. Let's run this test and let's see what happens. There it goes. Cool. Ladder arena 1, pass. Average crowns, 2.24 crowns. All right, let's switch back over. Looks like it passed. Cool. So now we got it. See, that wasn't too bad, right? I think we were able to copy paste and bada bing bada boom. So we added this. Now notice how what I'm doing now is I'm copying a lot of code, right? All of this stuff is the same. And that's where I said, yes, people could argue that why don't you just get these 3 lines and cut and paste into the setup and other. Sure, just again, you're making the setup look real ugly just because you're trying, I mean, you're doing all this to try to simplify things, when if you put some time into building out a framework, into using the page object model and really making a library of functionality, it's going to be a lot of maintenance. I mean, imagine this is only 2 tests. What happens if something changes here? The link text, popular text, changes. What if all of a sudden they say it's now popular text with no spaces, just because an example, right? Well, in that case, I need to go to every single one of my tests, and I have to do that, right? Let's say ladder is gone, so no longer a valid test. Well, all of my tests that use ladder, I have to go in there and change every single one of them, right? So all this stuff I'd have to change just to get all of my tests to work. In other words, one thing changes, I have to make the edit in multiple tests rather than one edit affects all tests, right? So this is Selenium out of the box. This is not me encapsulating or abstracting anything away. Now that we've seen this and I've given you some use cases and some pros and cons, mainly cons, of why we don't do it this way, let me show you kind of my approach for it. And I would love to hear you guys' feedback or see if there's any way I can help you guys get to this. Now, again, this is the part where we're going to start getting into some things that may be a little more advanced, more like intermediate to advanced, because there'll be things that I'll be using lingo. I've already been saying like encapsulation and abstractions and whatnot. Polymorphism, other things will come into picture here as well. If you don't understand these, shoot, write them down and start Googling and finding out, start learning that. But try to stick with me as best you can, and let's get through this. So let me minimize all this good stuff, these 2 wonderful tests. I'm going to comment this out. And let's minimize all these lovely things. And now here, this is, and before I do the great reveal, crap, you guys probably saw it already. Let me just show you what the setup and the cleanup look like doing the exact same things. Right? Now I'm going to open this one back up because I want us to see what this looks like. I want everybody to see like the setup and then the test again, right? And so let me comment all this out as well. Just comment all the things, am I right? All the things commented. So right here, the test and the setup, instantiate a new iWebDriver, maximize the window, and instantiate a new WebDriver wait. All 3 of those steps are done using driver.init, in my init, I say, give me a driver type. I have two. I have a remote or a local because I do things like Docker and Selenium Grid. And so I either remote to them or I say just run on my local machine, more like debugging kind of in a way, right? The next thing I say is give me a browser of any type I specify. Give me a Firefox, give me a headless Chrome, give me an Opera, give me Safari, IE, Edge, like give me whatever driver I want, and my driver will then turn into that kind of driver. So again, instead of in our first test we said just be Chrome because doing something like this would be a lot of code. Here in one line it looks like I'm doing all of this logic, and I am, but in the test, which is the place that matters the most, you don't see that. All of that is hidden away in the background in my framework, right? The next thing and the most important piece is this pages.init. This pages is just a controller, if you will, or a class that holds the pages that I'll be using throughout the tests, right? So in this case, I only have 3 pages, and in the test that we're going to be doing, only these two really matter, line 9 and line 12. But anytime I need to access these, I would just say pages.home.whatever my home class has, or pages.populardex.whatever my populardex class has. In order to give these values, I say pages.init. Once I call this, all of my pages get values, and then they're ready to go, right? So it's super, super simple, and yet it's so powerful. So this thread static, because I get this a lot, and I think it's people that either don't understand C# or they've never used thread static before. If you look at my driver is also static, right? And the funny thing is I see a lot of people say, oh, your driver should never be static, your driver should never be static. And that's true because you want to be able to parallelize things, right? You want to be able to run multiple tests at the same time, and you can't do that if you're using a static driver because you'll have one driver trying to go to different instances and it just won't work, right? Thread static lets you parallelize while still using static syntax. So in other words, my driver is used just like a static class, well, because it is a static class, and yet whenever I initialize my driver, I say driver.init. Here's the driver, which is an iWeb driver, and I'm actually giving it from my driver factory, giving it the type and the browser I want to pass in. And then my iWeb driver becomes that type of driver. So my static class driver, this right here, is a wrapper of Selenium's driver. Now, again, this is where things get a little tricky and a little more advanced because that might be AO Creative Cloud. That might sound a little cryptic. That might sound a little confusing. But doing it this way, again, thread static lets me have multiple threads, just like I'm making multiple instances, right, of my driver class, because I am. Every time I have a thread that opens up and I say driver.init, that thread now has a brand new Chrome driver. A new thread gets run for my second test, driver.init gets run there, a whole new driver gets built there. So now I have a static browser here and a static browser here, but they're both being run in parallel, right? The reason why I do this is because it simplifies the way that I have to structure my code and structure my tests. Because instead of me maintaining an instance of iWeb driver, I can just say driver dot throughout my entire code. So to give you a good example of this, let me go into this page objects folder and let me go into this Google page. Or actually, I think it'd be best if I actually just continue in the context of Stats Royale. So let me go to this home page and Popular Dex page. And right here, my Popular Dex page map, you'll see that I just say driver.findElement. There is no constructor. I'm not passing in an iWeb driver when I initialize this or construct this, right? There's nothing like that. I just say driver.findElement because my driver is static, quote unquote, right? And this actually has a find element right here and a find elements, right? And so driver.findElement will run this code. And inside of the rest of my framework, inside of the rest of the code, it looks like I'm just using a static driver, right? It's kind of crazy, but I promise you guys it works, and it works super well. So that would be one of the biggest things is you can make your driver static. And again, this is C#, but you can make your driver static if you leverage thread static. If you guys want to get more information on it, Microsoft has a ton of information on thread static. There's lots of examples as well, or you can hit me up too, and I can give you some more examples, or maybe even like kind of help you get started. But again, that's how I use. I mean, you'll see here like driver.wait. You'll see driver doing a lot of things inside of my tests. Even it's driver.init, driver.quit. I'm using it everywhere, and instead of needing to say this up here, where you saw WebDriver, and then in test initialize, that driver equals a new Chrome driver, and all that jazz, all these lines of code just to say all I care about is the driver itself. You have to do it this very verbose way. And that's fine. It's just, again, it's a lot more code. And my entire goal is to make things as easily readable as possible and as easy to use as possible, right? Because that makes maintainability, scalability, all that stuff just way better. So again, going back in here, it's the reason why you see driver.init in there. In order for me to actually have a web driver to then build off of and work off of, you have to call driver.init. Just like if I want my home page to have a value, I have to say pages.init. Because if you guys remember, init is what gives my home page an actual value. Otherwise, this is still just null and nothing actually happens, right? All right, so now that we have this, I'm going to reveal the test method. Again, I want to show this code because it feels bad. I'm just kidding. No, it doesn't feel bad. Let me uncomment this. Pow, pow. And then let me go in here and uncomment these two because they didn't do anything wrong. There we go. So here's this code, Selenium out of the box. And here it is with the page object model that I use, right? Now, take a second real quick to just read through this, because reading through it, it's very, very much keyword, it seems very keyword driven, right? What I like to do is give the people that use my framework, because the way that I build my framework, you guys, is I build my framework, I build the test automation and everything in a way that it's used as a service. In other words, it's not me writing these tests. My team of QA engineers are going to be the ones writing the tests, maintaining the tests, because they're the ones in the actual feature teams, the sprint teams, right, doing the stuff. So they're the ones who find out first that things are changing, things need to be updated, things are moving, scope has changed. They're the ones who find out. If it were them to then say, hey, a change is coming, I don't know how to use your code, here's all these changes, I would become, or the automation team would become a bottleneck very, very quickly, right? And so does that mean that I need to train all of my QA engineers to know programming? Yes and no. They need to know enough to use my framework. That doesn't mean they need to be C# experts, right? In this case, it's very easy to say, if you need access to any of the pages, you say pages dot, and then you have a list of pages. So just like we built this test here, the second test to do this, let's do the same thing, and I'm not going to copy paste. Public void better than your last test, homie. That's the name of this test. Better than your last test, homie. All right. So now that we have this, just watch as we go. Looking at these steps again, just go to Stats Royale, go to Popular, all that good stuff. We're just going to start writing it out. Pages dot, I have access to all my pages. I have access to Google, access to Home, access to init, Popular Dex, and whatnot. Obviously, at this point, we've really initialized, and so I'm at the home page. I just want to go to Stats Royale. Boom. From that point, I want to go to my Popular Dex page. Boom. At that point, Popular Dex, I want to select, what was it again? My deck type, right? Oh yeah, there it is. And it was ladder. Right? At that point, I want to say Popular Dex. I want to select my arena. Right? And my arena was Arena 1. Cool. And then on the same page, I want to select the sort by, this one right here. And this time I want to select it by stars. Right? And then I want to get the first deck. Hey, what do you know? There's actually a method for that. And then from there I can say assert.isTrue that deck.text.contains, and in here, what was it? I gotta switch over because I forgot. Flat arena 1 pack, but being valued 2.24 crowns. 2.24 crowns. And you guys, there it is. So again, the last one I copied and pasted because I didn't want to have to go through everything and have to find the selectors again. Fortunately, I could just copy paste and everything was there. But here, you don't see me finding any elements. You don't see me making select elements. You don't see me with any, like, there's no crazy logic or anything happening in here. I'm simply saying what, as a user, I want to do. The steps that I want to take. I want to go to Stats Royale. I want to go to the popular decks, filter some stuff out, grab the first deck, and that's the deck I want to play with. And there you go. I mean, it's using it like this, you guys. I kid you not. A lot of you guys may not even see what's happening behind the scenes, but the test makes sense. You look at it and you know exactly what it's doing. You may have no programming experience at all, and yet you see this and it makes sense to you. I kid you not, you guys, being able to do this and be able to show stakeholders, show your CTO, show your CEO, the tests in this format will make them go like, oh, you know, it's crazy because they can read it. And when they can read your code, even if they don't know how to program themselves, it makes you look A, like a genius. B, your code is the documentation. Because, I mean, look at that. That's the documentation. Granted, my name better than your last test homie isn't the best name, but we won't talk about that. But I hope you guys can see that it makes it very, very easy to write tests. Now, I said that it's also easy to maintain tests. And you're like, well, Carlos, how can I maintain this if everything's built for me? Well, again, that goes back to when I said build it as a service. But let's go into it. So, we don't need this one, we don't need this one, we don't need this one. I'm going to go into the popular decks page and start with these two things. Number one, the page object model, the way that I interpret it, the way that I do it, is you have two classes. You have the page map, which answers the question, what is on the page? And then you have the page class, which answers, what can the user do on the page, right? You can have a third one called a validator, which is what is the expected behavior of the page, right? But you can, if you want to, start with just these two and answer that question of what's expected on this page. You can have that inside of the page class as well. Either way, but let's look at it. So going down here, number one is my popular decks page map. So in my code, I created a folder called page objects. You can call it anything. And in some other things, I call it just pages. This one I called it page objects because this was more for demoing, right? But inside of here, I have subpages, base, and then just the pages themselves, right? And so my pages, I always call the name of the page. So in this case, my file is called populardexpage.cs, right? And so you'll see right here, populardexpage, that's the class. Inside of the same file, though, I always have a map class. So it's the same name, populardexpage map. So I just add map at the end of it, right? And that's it. Inside of here, then, I'm able to then find the elements and I store them in this map. Now, what's cool about C# is that you have this thing called lazy initialization where it won't actually run anything inside of here until you call the code. Once I say map.dexContainer, then it will run driver.findElement by class name and it'll actually run that code. Until then, it kind of holds the value and just waits for you to call it, right? That's called lazy initialization. And so we leverage it a crap ton because it makes, again, things super easy to read and super easy to use, and thanks C# for making things so awesome. So here, dex container, this is just the container of all the decks, right? And then within that, you have the actual decks themselves, and it's each one of those rows like I talked about, right? And then you have the 3 filter drop-downs, deck type, arena type, and sort by, right? And all of those elements I've stored in the map. So what's nice is that if anything on this page were to change, any of the elements move, it has a new ID, we no longer have a modal, it's now inline, or anything like that, my QA engineers know that what is on the page has changed. And so what they need to do is they go to that page's map class, because that page's map class is what is on the page. And so they just open up pages, they go down here, this is the page that's changing, it's my checkout page, it's my login page, they go to it, open it up, and they go down to the map, and that's where they work. The selector is changed. We finally added an ID. We no longer have this, whatever, and they change it in here. And that's it. So they know exactly where to go to solve a problem like that. The next thing, because that's the map, right? The next thing is the actual page class itself uses the map to then do things, because it uses what's on the page to perform actions, just like a user does. A user goes to your website and uses what's on that website to perform different actions, right? Exact same thing. Think of it in the perspective of a user. What, as a user, are my intentions? What's the intent, right? And what are the actions that I would perform, right? That's why you say things like go to, because I can go to pages, right? I want to go to the PopularDex page. So pages.populardex.goto, right? I can get the first deck. I want to select deck type, arena type, sort by. You know what I mean? You can do all those things, and I'm sure there's more you can do in here that I haven't added in. But that gives you a good idea of, it's almost like everything inside the page class is kind of verbs, right? Things you can do using what's on the page. And so you'll see here like go to, get, select, wait, like all those are verbs, right, that you've used on the page. And then you'll see things like this, where select deck type, I've gotten that whole, what you see here, the select equals select element, map.decktype.drop or deck type drop down, and then select by text deck, which is what I pass in. I'm wrapping those, encapsulating them, so that way a lot of functionality is done via one method call, right? The one method call will call other things underneath it, of course, but in your test, all you see is pages.populardex.select deck type, and all you do is pass in the deck type you want. And so in the test, it becomes a one-liner. It becomes very simple. It becomes an action or a step the user actually takes. Where in the page class, there's a lot more things happening going on. But my QA engineers don't need to know select element. My QA engineers don't need to do all this stuff. All they need to do is, as a user, I just need to select the drop-down and pick the value I'm looking for. And so that makes it so then they can go in here into my tests and write tests very, very quickly, because they're writing tests against what the user expects, and that's what the page class should do. The page class should show you the actions you can take on the page, the intent, right? Now, one thing you'll notice, I'll go back to my PopularDex page. One thing you'll notice is that I have this PopularDex page map. I should make this read only, because I only give it a value whenever I make a new PopularDex page, right? When I make a new page, every page has a map, right? So I say, give me a new page, and now my map has been generated or has been instantiated, right? But now you'll see that my map is public, and I call it just map. The reason I do this is because that way inside of your test, there will be times where the person just needs to access elements on the map, right? So if I just need to access something on the home page, for example, or we'll use the PopularDex page, you'll see that map is an option. Map dot, and here's all the elements I have access to. So in the tests, you can still access the elements within the map. I'm not making it private, or I'm not restricting them access to it. Just if they want to get to the elements, they have to go through the page's map class to do it. That way, there's a pattern that's now been created. Excuse me. Every page has a map on it. And so every page will have this pages.nameofpage.map.a list of all of your elements. And here, you can then do things like, let me get this dex, this is a list, right? And I can say, instead, I want the second deck, because I feel like it, right? Var second deck. And you can do that, right? And so it allows essentially for customizations and things that you can do by accessing the elements through the map. But again, the pattern is that the page itself always has a map attached to it. So in the tests, if you want to access the map, you have to go through the page's map dot list of all of your elements, right? Again, that pattern makes it super easy to train, super easy to explain. That rhymed, let's go. But you see what I mean? Like that's what I'm trying to get at, guys. I'm trying to get to the simplicity of it, how easy it is to use, how fun it is to use, because it's all about the fun. All because we put some work in to kind of architect what the framework's going to look like with simplicity in mind, with ease of use, readability, and scalability in mind, right? All right, so I'll get off my soapbox a little bit because fun is good. Fun is good. Whew. So next thing is, if you guys notice on every single page, this always persists up here, right? I always have my decks. I always have my search tag player. Again, I don't play this game, so there's a lot of the stuff I don't actually know. So you search the player's tag. I'm sure you can find their stats and whatnot or whatever. But this top navigation bar always persists. It's always there. And so instead of saying every page needs to have this, like I have to spec these elements out in every single one, I think you guys figured it out as I've been talking about this. You actually put it somewhere like it's a page. In this case, I'm using page base. If I go in here, all I have is this called top nav. So let me go in here, because that wasn't cool. You just got I just have to go deeper. Anyway, so right here, and look, what did you know? It looks just like the page classes, right? Because it basically is. Just in this case, instead of calling it a page class, I just called it top nav, right? So top nav and top nav map. And here's the elements I care about in the top nav. And you can put all of them in there if you want. In this case, I haven't because it's just for demo purposes. But you can put all your elements in there. And then you'll see that in here, I can actually search players with tag ID. And I say map.searchfield.sendKeys, the tag ID. Here I say go to popular decks. Well, if you guys remember in my tests, right here, I had to actually click decks, open up the menu, click popular decks. That would take me to popular decks, right? In my top nav, I just say top nav.go to popular decks. And then here I do those 2 clicks, right? And so every single page that inherits page base, all of them can go to popular decks, right? And so in my popular decks page, my go-to, if I want to get to the popular decks page, I just say populardex.go-to, right? And then here I say topnav.go to popular decks, which we know clicks decks, clicks popular decks. And then I also wait for the page to load just to ensure that everything is loaded as expected before I proceed, right? And there you go. Let me go to this definition here so you can see that I actually have a method in this page class called wait for page load that just waits until this element is displayed, the decks container that holds all the decks. Wait till that's displayed, and once that's displayed, I consider the page loaded, continue on with the next line, right? But you guys, honestly, that's it. I know I went through it pretty quickly. There's a lot and so much that I could cover. I'll open up the pages class one last time so you could see this, because this is kind of what lets you do the pages.home, pages.populardex, and it's this structure right here. You'll notice, again, these are under thread static as well. You'll also notice that these are fields, not properties, because thread static does not work on a static property. Because, yeah, so it's on static fields that you can do it on. And so you'll see that these are all fields, and then I give these values when I do pages.init. So there's that. And then last thing, going back to this, so you guys can see, there's my setup, there's my cleanup, here's the 2 tests I wrote, and they both work. They're both easy to read, both easy to write. And the beauty is that if something were to change, let's say like in the select deck type, right? In here, instead of needing to change the locator in every single one of my tests, I go to the map, I go to the element, I make the change, and all of my tests are now affected by that change. All right, guys, well, that's it. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys have been writing some things down or taking some notes or writing some criticism, ready to be like, Carlos, why the heck are you doing this, man? I would love to hear everything you have to say. So again, my entire goal here is not to try to convert everyone to C#. That's not it. It's just to kind of show you guys that there are different ways of doing things. And even though there are a few different variations of the page object model, like this one is kind of the way I go about it. I do it this way because out of all my experience that I've done, is just simplified so much, and it makes it easy for everyone in the department, not just QA engineers that don't know programming, but developers, other stakeholders, product managers. I mean, all of us can read the code. All of us can write and maintain tests. because it's easy to explain. Documentation super easy because it's just a documentation on patterns, not about the code itself. It's more of, the map, talking about the page class, the purposes of them and whatnot. And then that way, when they go into the code, I mean, it's like, oh yeah, I mean, all of the pages follow this pattern and it's really easy to use. And writing tests is really simple because I know that if I need to do anything with a page, I go pages dot and I have a list of pages. If I need to do anything with the driver, I just go driver dot and I have all the things I can do with the driver. And so that simplicity is the goal. That simplicity is what we're going for. And I kid you guys, I kid you not, it makes a world of difference for everybody that you're working with. And it makes QA look really, really awesome. That's it for me though, guys. Thanks again and have a good night. Happy testing.